Ladies and gentlemen, the world is changing, and in fact, the world is just a little bit out of whack today. The fastest growing economy in the capitalist world happens to be a communist one. Iceland, the country with the highest standard of living, according to the UN, is now bankrupt. And of course, New Zealand was the only country not to lose a single game in last year's World Cup. On the demographic front, not everything is as it used to be either, in fact. Who used to think that Gen Ys were weird? Okay, you're all Gen Ys. Thank you for your honesty and integrity. But Gen Z, born between 1994 and 2010, amongst this generational cohort, more 2 to 5-year-olds in the Western world now know how to tie their shoelaces than know how to actually play Angry Birds on their iPhones. I should reverse that, in fact. So more 2 to 5-year-olds in the Western world now know how to play Angry Birds on their iPhones than know how to actually tie their shoelaces. In Australia, on the demographic front, not everything is as it used to be either. In fact, 45% of Australian males now moisturise. Yeah? Tool shed ownership in Australia is down 20% over the last 10 years. And today, 12.4% of all Australian males will belly dance given a perfect excuse to do so. Things are changing very rapidly. Who's very comfortable with all of this change? Who loves change? Yeah, a few of you. Fantastic. Who hates change? Yeah, there's a few. Thank you for your honesty, because of course a change in cell structure, as we've heard, means cancer. Yeah? But who liked the change in weather today? It was pretty good, wasn't it? But as Australians, perhaps we don't like change so much. In fact, only 8 out of 44 referenda have actually passed in the affirmative, which is pretty interesting. And that's what we're kind of here to talk about, this fact that change doesn't really care whether you like it or not. In fact, it happens without our permission, doesn't it, Ian? Change happens around us constantly. I mean, we can reminisce about the good old days when a blackberry was just a fruit, right? Things were just a bit simpler back then. The good old days when we didn't have to actually add an emoticon when we expressed our emotions, Caitlin. Right? Things were just a little bit simpler, a little bit calmer back then. Today we're here to talk a little bit about data, but also about story and how you can create change in other people around you. And I reckon to really create change in a social engagement and driving social change around the world, and this is going to be unpopular potentially, we need to start thinking more like corporates. We need to bring data and story together to truly bring about results. These guys know how to do it really well. Now, we've heralded Steve Jobs as a real genius at Apple, but I reckon this guy has as much to do with it as Steve Jobs did. And kudos and respect to Steve Jobs, who I had a professional man crush on. I think he was a genius. But it was as much, if not more, the left brain analytics of Tim Cook, who re-engineered the supply chain, who brought data into Apple to really look at how they could create a lean organization that was as responsible for bringing it to the largest market capitalized company in the world as it had to do with Steve Jobs' lone genius. I was recently at Cupertino at Apple, and one of the things that really struck me at the time when talking to one of the financial services guys there was that he said that Apple makes $2,800 every second, Anders. That's pretty impressive. Yeah? That's 2 iPads, an iPhone, and an iMac sold every second of every day. This is the reason their Fifth Avenue concept store is open 24/7, 365, by the way. And I think we all need to take on some of that thinking as we start thinking more globally but acting locally. That's easy to say if you're Swedish as well. In fact, we all, I think, as social change agents and agent provocateurs actually need to start taking some advice from that great Australian thought leader, Shane Warne. Because Shane gets that for him to truly engage internationally, for him to truly form profitable relationships, he needs to think global, but still act like a bogan. And I think we all need to bring some of that stuff together. In fact, I get inspired by the city of Shanghai, a city that has the same amount of people as the entire continent of Australia. And I think as Australians, sometimes we get constrained by island thinking. I was doing a lot of consulting around the intergenerational report, the 2050 report last year, and it scared me how small we were thinking. By the year 2050, Australia is likely to move from 22 million people to 35 million people. That's 40 years away. Shanghai, one city, same population as Australia, 22 million to 45 million by the year 2020. Do you think that's going to require a little bit of data ingenuity, a little bit of infrastructure, some sustainable roofs, some urban farming, some innovation? You bet. And I think in this world where everything is very, very quickly digitizing, where we're living in an entirely new world, we need to start thinking differently and upgrade the way we think about change and also how we get buy-in. Because we have these kind of volumes of data, waves of data crushing down on us all of the time. And I think as any good social agent, we need to start thinking about the data to actually communicate better with corporates who we are reliant on at the moment for some real change. We need to engage with the waves of data to actually communicate and get buy-in into the changes that we're going to bring around the world. We can use tools like the steep kind of trend spotting analysis, for example, to tune into socio-cultural, technological, economic, environmental and political trends to better communicate where the future of social engagement is actually going to sit. And I think if we sort of reminisce about the good old days, we can think about Hamlet, my Scandinavian forebear. He lived in kind of easier times. What was his big philosophical challenge in life? Where are all the English students? Like, did someone do English at school? Okay, I'm so happy I competed with you guys in the HSC. Okay, all right. It was to be or not to be. It was pretty black and white, wasn't it? Yeah? But I think we're living in more difficult times now. They are just a little bit more complex, a little bit more grey. And I think we're living in that intersection where kind of data and story is coming together. The kind of financial analysis of Tim Cook, but also the creative genius of Steve Jobs. And I think we need to look left and also right to see how we're going to proceed. In fact, all of the answers to your problems lie inside your brains. Because your brains are divided into a left and also a right hemisphere. The left is a little bit more logical, analytical, sequential and mathematical. The right brain is a little bit more creative, innovative and future-minded. And we need to actually bring them together so that we can ensure that our ideas truly get incepted. But if you've ever seen that ad for, hi, I'm a Mac and I'm a PC, you'll know what I'm talking about. PCs are just a little bit more left brain, Macs a little bit more right brain. We've got data versus story. But if we look to the market share of Apple just over the last few years, it's interesting to note that their Q1 11 market share was sitting at a pretty humble 11%. This is not counting all the iPads in the audience here, by the way. But if you look at the growth of Apple compared to all these left-brain companies, for example, what you can see there in the yellow behind me is that it actually increased its market share by 15% in a market that overall in the world actually shrunk 4%. Now, this data is interesting because Macs are just a little bit more right-brained in some ways. Whoever got an instruction manual when they bought their new iMac? No instruction manuals come, but you might be special. Okay. Maybe you get one at the Genius Bar when you actually get there. So my encouragement to all of you here today as students, and by the way, McKinsey says that the top talent that companies are looking for today are T-shaped individuals. People on the vertical who have a deep-centered sense of expertise in a particular area, yeah? The kind of logic, the left brain, the data, the statistics, the analysis, but also the breadth on the horizontal axis to actually emotionally connect with people around them. Now, I want to encourage all of you to actually become T-shaped. And I think as people, sometimes we forget our humanity, as Bill Compton would say. And all my philosophy comes from True Blood, by the way. I think we need to remember our humanity. Because as humans, we get so much data thrown at us all of the time, from 360 degrees. Yeah? Who loves the slides, by the way? Well, you might be a visual learner, and thank you very much. I can sleep quietly to boost my jet lag kind of battle today as well. Who hates the slides? Who's gotten seasick because of them? Okay, I will be weeping into my pillow if anyone does. Some of you learn best visually. Some of you are going to love the sound of my voice, I hope. And some of you like the conversations in the kind of spaces in between all the talks, thinking that the speakers are just the fluffers who kind of engage you socially beyond here today. But we have so much data, and sometimes as human beings, we suck at using it. Or so I'm told by all my ex-girlfriends. Yeah? We are thrown data all of the time, and we just don't know how to use it. But corporates do. We're living in a new environment of big data right now, which is enabling corporations to communicate in a more tailored fashion with you than I am. And as human beings, I think we need to take back some of that power and actually be inspired by corporations' ability to use big data to tailor our communications better. The data deluge in which we now live means that organizations like Zynga, and some of you will be using their games online socially every day, are now generating 5 terabytes of data every day about their social consumers' habits. Who's ever received a bill from Google? Yeah? We're paying them every day by telling them about our behaviors so they can better tailor, persuade and manipulate you. Interesting new times, isn't it? I think data wants to be social in many ways. Data wants to be set free. And I think we need to socially analyze data to better communicate what your organizations are trying to do. Data is less about ones and zeros today and more about story, but it's when the two come together that you can truly make an impact in the world. According to Facebook, I'm a Brooklyn Jew. Sometimes they get it wrong, right? What business is Facebook really in? Data mining, absolutely. So they can tailor ads to us. Now they think I'm a Brooklyn Jew, and even though I have Jewish family, I'm not technically Jewish. I wish I was sometimes. But I spend a lot of time in Brooklyn in New York. I have Jewish family from the Bronx, and I also spend a lot of time in Israel. Now I upload photos on Facebook, doing status updates from Israel or Brooklyn, and I happen to like Brooklyn beer. Now, Facebook hasn't nailed my advertisements about reading the Torah or going on religious tours to Israel quite yet, although it sounds interesting. But we're getting more and more closer to kind of this data mining revolution of tailored communications. On websites like brandkarma.com, the brand karma of various companies are being displayed. This is based on the algorithms and the data mining of social conversations through social analytics online. And the more green and yellow your brand karma flower, the better your organization is perceived out in the Twitter sphere. Interesting new times. The most trusted brands in mobile payments at the moment are companies who understand how to use this data to tell a better story that is truly aligned with their consumers' interests. MasterCard, Visa, American Express, not a single one of them happens to be a bank. Now, I've just come back from Amsterdam working with ABN AMRO on future-proofing and scenario planning their future as a bank. The future of the bank is as a data miner, not in accounts. Interesting new times. And I think we all need to realise that we're kind of more high maintenance now. In fact, the great Australian thought leaders and management gurus, Kath and Kim, really nailed this. Because what do they say? Look at me, look at me, look at me, right? It's all about new communications. In fact, the golden rule is defunct today. No longer is it good enough to treat other people the way we want to be treated or communicate with them the way we want to be communicated with. We need to step up and actually communicate with people and treat them the way they want to be treated, which takes a bit of new thinking. The way we like to think is also the way we like to communicate. If you love numbers, start thinking with your heart. If you love your heart, start thinking in numbers. It's that easy. And I think because of this, what we're seeing is a shift from kind of demographic segmentation to psychographic. segmentation, the focus on attitudes, beliefs, and values. Because in Japan, more adults read Comic-Cons than children in the United States. We're all a bit wacky right now. The fastest growing segment on Facebook right now are 55 to 65-year-old women. In fact, there's a new t-shirt out in the marketplace which says, "I Facebooked your mum." We're all generational transvestites and a little bit weird. And we need to be communicated with in a psychographic fashion moving forward. This is my mother in Sweden. This photo was taken yesterday. The vest she's wearing, and it's coming back into fashion, I'm told, I was given as a gift when I was 17. Clearly I loved it. But I have this auntie who is not my favorite person in the family, who insists on giving me gifts every year. She never thinks about what I want. And as you can see, I make good use out of my presents. They get passed on in the family. And I think today, more so than ever, it's the thought that counts. But it's the thought about what our key stakeholders actually want, not what we want. We're not that far away from this world where more and more companies are moving into data mining. The LCD screens on the side of London buses are now connected up to GPS devices. So as the bus actually drives through Kensington, then takes a right turn into South Kensington, then goes forward into Notting Hill, they know that Julia Roberts is just a little bit more high maintenance than her neighbours down the road. And they shift the advertisements based on the psychographics in the area. And my question to all of you today is that when are we as people going to be better at communicating with people? Or are corporates going to do it? Thank you.